John Dillinger was one of the most infamous criminals of the 1930s in the United States. He was known for his daring bank robberies and his ability to evade capture. He became a symbol of the public enemy era, during which the government and law enforcement agencies made a concerted effort to capture notorious criminals. Dillinger was born in Indianapolis, Indiana in 1903. He had a difficult childhood and was involved in petty crimes from a young age. He was arrested for the first time in 1924 for car theft and served 9.5 years in prison. After his release in 1933, Dillinger immediately returned to a life of crime. He formed a gang of criminals and began robbing banks. Dillinger's first major bank robbery took place in East Chicago, Indiana in July 1933. The gang stole $10,000 and Dillinger quickly became known as a daring and successful criminal. Over the next year, Dillinger and his gang pulled off several more bank robberies, earning them a significant amount of money. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, led by J. Edgar Hoover, took notice of Dillinger and his gang's criminal activities. They put together a special task force to capture him, known as the Dillinger Squad. This task force, led by Melvin Purvis, used new technologies and tactics to track and capture criminals. Despite the FBI's efforts, Dillinger continued to evade capture. He even managed to break out of jail twice, once in Crown Point, Indiana, and again in Lima, Ohio. He became a folk hero to some, with people seeing him as a Robin Hood figure who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Dillinger's luck eventually ran out in July 1934. The FBI received a tip that Dillinger was going to see a movie at the Biograph Theater in Chicago. Agents staked out the theater, and when Dillinger emerged, they opened fire. Dillinger was shot and killed, bringing an end to his criminal career. John Dillinger's criminal career may have been short-lived, but it made him one of the most notorious criminals of the 1930s. He was a symbol of the public enemy era, during which the government and law enforcement agencies made a concerted effort to capture notorious criminals. His life and death continue to be the subject of books, movies, and documentaries. Dillinger's story is a reminder of the impact that one person can have on the public's perception of crime and criminals, and it is a testament to the enduring allure of the outlaw figure in American culture. James Whitey Bulger was a notorious American gangster and organized crime leader from Boston, Massachusetts. He was born on September 3, 1929, and spent most of his criminal career as the leader of the Winter Hill Gang, a powerful Irish-American crime organization that controlled much of the criminal activity in Boston during the 1970s and 1980s. Bulger's criminal career began in the 1950s when he became involved in organized crime, starting as a small-time criminal and eventually rising to the top of the criminal underworld in Boston. He was known for his brutal tactics and willingness to use violence to maintain his power and control over the criminal activities in the city. During his time as the leader of the Winter Hill Gang, Bulger was involved in a wide range of criminal activities, including extortion, loan sharking, and drug trafficking. He also had connections to corrupt law enforcement officials and politicians, which allowed him to operate with relative impunity for many years. In the early 1980s, Bulger and his gang became the target of a federal investigation led by the FBI. However, due to his connections to corrupt law enforcement officials, he was able to evade capture for many years. It was revealed that Bulger had been an FBI informant since 1975, providing information on the Italian-American Mafia in exchange for protection from prosecution. This information helped the FBI to cripple the New England Mafia, but also allowed Bulger to continue his criminal activities unchecked. In 1994, Bulger fled Boston after being tipped off by his FBI handler that he was about to be indicted. He remained a fugitive for over 16 years, during which time he was one of the FBI's most wanted criminals and on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Bulger was finally captured in 2011 in Santa Monica, California, where he had been living under an assumed identity. He was convicted in 2013 of multiple counts of racketeering, extortion, money laundering, and 11 murders and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison. Bulger's trial and subsequent conviction brought to light the corrupt relationship between him and the FBI, and several agents were charged with obstruction of justice for their involvement in protecting Bulger while he was an informant. Despite his brutal crimes, Bulger had some supporters, who believed he was a Robin Hood-like figure who helped the poor and took on the corrupt authorities. However, majority of people saw him as a ruthless criminal who terrorized the city of Boston for decades. Bulger died in prison on October 30, 2018. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, better known as Bonnie and Clyde, were a notorious criminal couple who operated in the central United States during the early 1930s. Their crime spree, which included robberies, murders, and kidnappings, captured the attention of the nation and turned them into folk heroes. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow met in Texas in January 1930. Bonnie, a 21-year-old waitress, and Clyde, a small-time criminal who had just been released from prison. They quickly fell in love and began committing crimes together. Their first known robbery was in April of that year, at a store in Texas. Their crime spree quickly escalated, and they began robbing banks and small stores across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. They were known for their flashy cars and their willingness to use violence to escape capture. During their 2-year crime spree, Bonnie and Clyde became media sensations. They were romanticized in the press as Robin Hood-like figures, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. The public was fascinated by their daring crimes and their reckless lifestyle. In May 1934, a posse of law enforcement officials ambushed Bonnie and Clyde in Louisiana, killing them both in a hail of bullets. The couple had been driving a stolen Ford Deluxe and were caught by surprise. Bonnie and Clyde were buried side by side in separate graves in Dallas. The legacy of Bonnie and Clyde lives on, and the couple has been the subject of numerous books, movies, and songs. Their crime spree has been romanticized and glamorized over the years, with some people viewing them as Robin Hood-like figures and others viewing them as ruthless criminals.